Have you ever heard someone knocking on your door when you know for sure that no one should be there? That sound, soft, rhythmic, patient, becomes more than just noise. It becomes a pulse that crawls under your skin. You tell yourself it's nothing. Maybe the pipes, maybe the wind. But what if it's something else? What if it's someone who isn't supposed to be here anymore? Because that's what happened to me. My neighbor keeps knocking, but he moved out a year ago. It started one night when everything felt too quiet. You know, that kind of silence that almost hurts your ears? I was lying in bed when I heard it. 3 knocks. Calm, precise, familiar. At first I didn't think much of it, but the sound came again, the exact same rhythm, like a habit that never died. The strange thing is, it was coming from the apartment next door, the one that's been empty since Daniel left. Daniel, my old neighbor, the one who disappeared. He wasn't just a stranger. We used to talk, short chats in the hallway about bills, work, and the weather. He was the kind of guy who always smiled but never really meant it. There was something heavy behind his eyes, like he was always waiting for something bad to happen. When he moved out, no one saw him leave. The landlord said he packed at night, just vanished. A week later, they found his car still parked outside. No forwarding address, no calls, nothing. So, when I heard the knocking, I tried to ignore it. But it came back the next night. Same time, same rhythm. I pressed my ear against the wall, and I swear I heard breathing. I remember standing there, frozen, listening to something that shouldn't exist. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just in my head. Something or someone was trying to get my attention. People say your mind can play tricks on you, especially when you're alone. But I wasn't alone that night. The next morning, my downstairs neighbor asked if I was having trouble sleeping. He said he heard footsteps pacing my hallway around 3 a.m. The problem: I never left my bed. Every story I told myself to stay calm began to fall apart. And the worst part, I started expecting the sound. It's strange how fear can become a routine. You start to wait for it, even crave it, because silence feels worse. I began recording at night, thinking maybe I could prove to myself it was nothing. But when I watched the footage, there it was. The sound of knocking, clear as day, echoing through the mic. Only, there was no one there. No shadow, no movement, just the noise. That's when I noticed something else. Every time the knocking stopped, I'd find something slightly moved in my apartment. A chair pulled out, a picture frame tilted, my front door unlocked. I changed the locks, I left the lights on, I even slept with the TV running. None of it mattered. The knocking always came back. And then, one night, it wasn't coming from next door anymore. It was closer, much closer, right on the other side of my door. I could see the shadow of feet under the light, still waiting. I remember whispering his name. Daniel? That's when the knocking stopped, but the silence that followed, that was worse, because I realized something I hadn't before. Whoever or whatever was out there knew I was listening, and that's when everything started to change. If you've ever felt that chill crawling down your spine when something doesn't quite make sense, when the air feels heavier than it should, then you already know how real fear can be. It's not just the sound that scares you, it's the not knowing. That feeling when your instincts scream that something's wrong, but logic keeps trying to silence them. That's exactly what I felt, and maybe you have too. So before we keep going deeper into this story, take a second, hit the like button if you've ever had a moment that made your skin crawl for no reason. It helps more than you can imagine, because every click, every small interaction, pushes this story further. Lets it reach others who love the same dark mysteries you do. And tell me in the comments, have you ever heard something you couldn't explain? Maybe footsteps in an empty hallway, a voice when you're alone, or that strange, hollow feeling that someone is watching, even when you're sure they're not. I read every single one, and sometimes your stories are even more terrifying than mine. Sharing them keeps the darkness alive, not in a bad way, but in that curious, haunting way that makes us realize how much we don't understand about the world around us. If you're new here and you crave more stories that blur the line between the living and the forgotten, make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss what's coming next, because this story, it's just getting started. What happened after that night changed everything, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever ignored that first quiet knock. That first week after the knocking started felt like living inside a dream that refused to end. You know, that strange blur between waking and sleeping, where your thoughts echo louder than any sound around you. That's what my nights had become. Hours stretching endlessly, filled with half-whispers and shadows that seemed to move just beyond the corner of my eye. Every time I tried to convince myself it was nothing, the rhythm would return. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, always at the same time, always from the same wall. It wasn't random. It wasn't noise. It felt intentional, like someone was keeping a promise they never made. The first few nights, I did everything people tell you to do when you're scared. I turned on every light, checked every door, even pressed my hand against the wall to prove to myself it was solid, real, unbroken. But the knocking didn't care about reason. It came back, steady and calm, as if it was waiting for me to acknowledge it. That was the worst part. The patience. Fear doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in slowly, like water finding every crack. I stopped sleeping near that side of the apartment. I started leaving music on to drown it out. Yet even through the noise, I could still feel it, like the sound had learned how to breathe. I remember one night I decided to stay up just to catch it. I sat in the dark, lights off, back against the wall. Hours passed. My eyelids grew heavy, but my ears stayed sharp, searching for that familiar rhythm. When it finally came, I didn't move. 3 knocks, then silence, then a voice. It wasn't loud, more like a murmur slipping through the cracks. My name. I froze. The air felt thick, almost liquid, pressing against my chest. I wanted to speak back, to ask who was there, but something inside me said not to. Instinct, maybe, or something older. The next morning I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the pipes. Maybe the building was old and making sounds as it settled. But deep down, I knew better. The voice wasn't a creak or a vibration. It was human. I could feel the emotion in it, that quiet edge of desperation that only comes from someone who wants to be heard. And that's when I started thinking about Daniel again. My old neighbor, the one who used to knock exactly like that when he needed help carrying groceries or just wanted to talk for a minute. I remembered his laugh. Short, awkward, the kind people use to hide something else. He used to say weird things sometimes, like how he felt like the walls could listen, or that some nights he heard whispering behind them. I thought it was just his anxiety, but now, hearing the same sounds, I couldn't stop wondering. Was he trying to warn me before he left, or before he disappeared? By the 4th night, I wasn't just scared, I was obsessed. I started writing down the times the knocks came, what I was doing, how long they lasted. Patterns began to form. It always happened between 2:53 and 3:07 a.m. Always 3 knocks, never more, never less. Sometimes the last one would echo longer, almost like it was waiting for a response. That's when I noticed something else. My cat refused to go near that wall. She would hiss at nothing, eyes wide, fur standing on end. Animals don't imagine things. They feel what we ignore. And I started to think that maybe Daniel hadn't really left. Maybe part of him was still there, caught between whatever happens when we go and whatever keeps us from moving on. It's strange how your body learns to live with fear. You stop flinching at every sound. Instead, you start expecting it, timing it, preparing yourself. But the truth is, preparation doesn't help when the thing you're waiting for isn't supposed to exist. Sometimes I'd wake up before it even happened, heart racing, already aware of what was coming. The mind remembers the pattern, even when you try to forget. And deep down, I think something wanted me to remember. Like the knocking wasn't just random noise, it was communication. A call that demanded an answer. If you've ever had something follow you through silence, a sound, a dream, a memory, you know what it feels like to question your own reality. Fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet promise that something is still there, waiting for you to notice it again. So if you're still watching, still listening to this story unfold, I want you to type one word in the comments below, still, because that's how it all began for me. The knocking never stopped. It was always there, waiting. After the first week, sleep stopped being a thing I could count on. The nights started to stretch longer, heavier, like time itself didn't want to move forward. I'd sit in my living room, lights dimmed, the silence pressing on my ears until every creak in the wood felt like a whisper meant only for me. Sometimes I'd walk to the front door just to make sure it was locked. Sometimes I'd stare at it for minutes, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And when nothing did, that was somehow worse, because waiting for the knocking became its own kind of madness. The mind fills silence with ghosts when it has nothing else to hold on to. The neighbors said they didn't hear anything. That's what broke me the most. Everyone else seemed fine, normal, untouched. I started to feel like the entire building was breathing in unison except for me. My walls felt thinner, my floor colder. The air always carried that faint smell of damp wood and old dust, the kind of scent that sticks to you after years of things rotting quietly. I began noticing tiny details I'd never seen before. Faint scratches near the doorframe, a smudge like a fingerprint right where the paint chipped. Little signs of something I didn't remember doing, yet couldn't stop staring at. One night I decided to record the sound. I placed my phone near the wall, turned off every light, and waited. The knocks came, faint but distinct. 3, then a pause, then another set. But when I played it back the next morning, there was no knocking. Just a low, almost static hum, except in the middle of that hum, if you turned the volume all the way up, there was something else. Breathing. Slow, deliberate, and too close to the microphone. I don't know how long I stood there listening to it, but by the end, I wasn't sure if the sound was coming from my phone or from somewhere inside the room with me. I told myself it was all in my head, that I needed to leave the apartment for a few days, reset. But the moment I stepped outside, it was like the world didn't recognize me anymore. The streets felt colder, the light too bright. People brushed past without a glance, as if I wasn't really there. And when I came back, I found something slipped under my door, a small folded note with only 3 words written on it. You heard me. No signature, no handwriting I recognized. Just those words, carved into my mind like a warning. After that, I stopped pretending it was coincidence. I started feeling watched, not just by whatever was behind the wall, but by the air itself, the way it shifted when I moved, how the shadows seemed to follow me a second too long. The knocking grew bolder, closer. It no longer came from the wall next door. It echoed through the floorboards, the ceiling, sometimes even from inside the closet. Every time I tried to confront it, the sound stopped, like it knew I was listening, like it enjoyed being in control. That's when fear turned into something else, fascination. I wanted to understand it, to see it. I found myself knocking back one night, just once, 3 small taps, matching its rhythm perfectly. Then silence. The air felt like it froze around me. I waited, my pulse pounding in my throat, every nerve screaming for me to stop. But then, after a few seconds, it answered. 3 knocks, identical, calm, patient. That's when I realized this wasn't just noise anymore. It was a conversation. If you've ever been so deep in your own fear that it starts to feel familiar, like an old friend whispering your name in the dark, you'll understand why I didn't stop. I should have run. I should have left the building that night. But I couldn't. Something about the pattern felt personal, intimate, like it knew me. Maybe it did. Maybe it always had. And that thought, more than the knocking itself, is what kept me awake the rest of the night, staring at the wall, waiting for the next reply. If you're still here with me, listening to this story unfold, write one word in the comments: listen. Because that's what I did. And it changed everything. The following nights felt heavier, like the air itself had thickened into something you could almost touch. Every sound became sharper, every silence stretched longer. I began to realize that my apartment wasn't just a place I lived in anymore. It was a reflection of my fear, every corner echoing the parts of my mind I didn't want to face. The knocking had stopped for 2 nights straight, and that should have been a relief. But it wasn't. The quiet felt staged, like the calm before something you know is coming, and the waiting was worse than the noise itself. Because silence, when it hides something, isn't peace. It's pressure. On the 3rd night, I decided to face it. I pulled my phone out, set it to record video this time, and placed it in the hallway facing the door. I wanted proof. Maybe I thought that if I saw it, really saw it, I could finally stop doubting myself. Midnight passed. 1 o'clock, then 2. Nothing. Just the low hum of the building, the refrigerator cycling, the occasional click of pipes. My body started to relax. And that's when the knocking came. Not from the door, but from behind me. 3 slow knocks on the wall above my bed. My phone was still in the hallway, facing the wrong direction. For a second, I just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling my chest rise and fall too fast. Then, as quietly as I could, I whispered, "Daniel." No answer, no movement. But I swear to you, I could feel something on the other side, not just presence, awareness. It wasn't random anymore, it was directed at me. I walked to the hallway, picked up my phone and turned the camera toward the wall. My hands were shaking so badly the image blurred. But in that blur, just for a second, I thought I saw something, a faint shape. Not solid, not smoke, more like a distortion in the air, like heat rising from asphalt. It flickered, then disappeared. The next day I showed the footage to my friend Claire. She works in audio editing, so I thought maybe she could explain the sound. She listened over and over, slowing it down, filtering the frequencies. Then she looked at me and said, "There's something strange here. It's not just knocking, it's a voice, layered underneath, like someone whispering your name through static." She tried to laugh it off, but I could see the color drain from her face. She left soon after, saying she'd call me later. She never did. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched the footage again, frame by frame. The shape was still there, subtle, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. It wasn't human, not completely. The angles didn't match, the proportions were wrong. The more I stared, the more it looked like something trying to imitate a person, but failing to understand what person meant. That's when I started to think that maybe it wasn't Daniel at all. Maybe whatever was knocking had just learned his rhythm. The following evening, something new happened. I came home from work to find my door slightly open. Not broken, not forced, just open. A soft draft moved through the hallway. Inside, everything looked the same except for one thing. In the middle of my living room floor lay a single photograph, old, worn, edges curled. It was me and Daniel standing in the hallway smiling, but the background didn't match. Behind us wasn't our apartment building. It was somewhere else, a place I'd never seen before. Grey walls, a door slightly ajar, And behind that door, if you looked closely enough, a faint hand pressed against the frame. That night, the knocking didn't come from the wall. It came from the floor beneath my feet. 3 sharp thuds, slow and deliberate, like something beneath the apartment wanted to come up. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened until the last knock hit, and I realized it wasn't below me anymore. It was inside the room. If you've ever stared into darkness and felt it stare back, you'll understand what it means to lose the boundary between fear and curiosity. Write the word awake in the comments if you're still with me, because that's what I was. Wide awake, listening to something that should have never found a way inside. After that night, I couldn't tell what was real anymore. My apartment, my reflection, even my own voice started to feel borrowed, like I was just mimicking the version of myself that used to live here before the knocking began. The air inside carried a strange tension, a static that made my skin crawl whenever I stood too still. It was as if the walls were aware of me now, watching me back, waiting for me to make the next move. I tried to leave a few times, I really did, but every time I grabbed my keys, a deep, nauseating pressure filled my chest, like the building itself didn't want me to go. The closer I got to the door, the stronger it felt. And then came the whispers. Faint, layered, all overlapping like memories fighting to be heard. I could make out one word repeating through them all. Stay. I told myself I wasn't crazy, that there had to be some rational explanation, but how do you reason with something that answers you when you don't speak? I began talking to it, not out loud at first, but in my head, a kind of silent dialogue. And the strange part, it started answering, not with words, but with sound. 3 knocks for yes, 1 for no. It sounds impossible, I know, but after days without sleep and a mind filled with noise, it felt like communication. I started asking questions I never should have asked. Are you Daniel? 3 knocks. Are you here because of me? Silence. I remember laughing nervously, trying to convince myself it was a coincidence. But then I asked, do you want me to open the door? And the answer came. 3 loud, deliberate knocks. That's when everything started to unravel. I began seeing Daniel everywhere, not directly, but in fragments. A reflection caught in the TV screen when it was off. A silhouette crossing the hallway when no one was there. Sometimes in my dreams, I'd see him standing on the other side of the wall, his hand pressed against it, his mouth moving, but no sound coming out. And then I'd wake up to the knocking again, perfectly timed with the dream. It was like he was following me between worlds, refusing to let me rest. One night I decided to face it. I turned off every light in the apartment, stood in front of the door, and waited. The clock hit 2:53 a.m., the exact time it always began. My hands were shaking, my breath uneven. I said it out loud this time. If it's really you, then show me. Nothing. Silence so heavy it hurt. I almost felt relieved, like maybe it was finally over. Then came the sound, not knocking, but scratching, slow, dragging, metal against wood. My body went cold. The sound traveled down the doorframe, like fingers tracing its edge, and then stopped right at the handle. I wanted to move, to run, to scream, but I couldn't. All I could do was stand there as the handle began to turn, inch by inch, until I could see the faintest crack of darkness on the other side. I slammed my hand against it, holding it shut, my pulse screaming in my ears. Whatever was out there didn't push. It waited. I could feel it breathing inches from me, patient as ever, and then it whispered. I don't know how to describe that voice. It wasn't Daniel's. It wasn't human. It was layered, like 100 voices trying to speak at once, forming one chilling phrase, "You let me in." When I woke up, it was morning. The door was closed. My hand still rested against the handle. For a second, I thought it was just a dream, until I saw the marks. 3 long scratches running down the inside of the door, from top to bottom, fresh and deep, like something had been pulled through from the other side. I don't remember opening it, but somehow I knew I had. From that night on, the knocking stopped completely. And that should have been a good thing, right? But silence isn't always peace. Sometimes silence is what's left after something finally gets what it wanted. The apartment felt different now. Too still, too heavy, like the air wasn't mine anymore. Even the light through the window looked grey, muted. I tried to convince myself it was over, but deep down, I knew better. Because when something crosses that line, from the outside to the inside, it doesn't leave. It waits, it watches, it learns. If you've ever stared at your door at night and felt like something on the other side was thinking, not knocking, type door in the comments. Because that's what it became for me. Not a barrier, but an invitation. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was presence, thick, suffocating, patient. I could feel it everywhere, in the walls, under the floor, even in the air I breathed. The apartment no longer felt like a space I lived in. It felt like something alive, pulsing, waiting. Every object carried weight. The clock that no longer ticked, the photo that still lay on the floor, the faint outline of those scratches on the inside of the door. I tried pretending everything was normal, moving through each day as if nothing had changed. But deep down, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Every time I blinked, it felt like the room had rearranged itself slightly. A chair turned a few degrees, a drawer half open, a shadow stretched longer than it should be. I wasn't sure if the world was shifting or if I was. I started hearing the sound again, but not the knocks. This time, it was footsteps, slow, deliberate, measured. They came from inside the apartment, late at night, circling the space just beyond where the light could reach. Sometimes they stopped right outside my bedroom door. I'd hold my breath listening, waiting for the handle to turn again, but it never did. Instead, I began waking up to find the door wide open, though I remembered closing it every single night. I tried to tell myself I was sleepwalking, that I was imagining it all. But one morning when I walked to the bathroom, I found condensation on the mirror, and drawn into it, 3 perfect fingerprints. Not mine. Days blurred. Nights stretched endlessly. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the reflections, not behind me, but inside the glass. Once I saw a shadow standing where I was supposed to be. It didn't mimic me. It watched. When I turned, it was gone, but the reflection stayed a second too long. I think that's when I realized whatever had been knocking wasn't trying to get in anymore. It already had. It was exploring, adapting, becoming part of the space. Part of me. My phone camera would turn on by itself. The lights would flicker whenever I spoke Daniel's name. It felt like the apartment was responding, like it had become a bridge between 2 worlds. One living, one not. One night I found the courage to watch the recordings again, the ones from before everything changed. As I scrubbed through the footage frame by frame, I noticed something I'd never seen before. Every time the knocking happened, my reflection in the hallway mirror moved half a second later than I did. A delay so small it could have been a glitch. But it wasn't, because on the last video, when I stood completely still, my reflection didn't. It tilted its head. It looked at me. Then the recording cut out. I wanted to leave after that. I really did. But the building wouldn't let me. Every time I packed a bag, something strange happened. Lights dimming, doors slamming, whispers rising until I dropped everything and sat back down. My heart would race, my thoughts looping, until I forgot why I wanted to go in the first place. I started wondering if Daniel went through the same thing. If maybe he never left at all. If maybe no one really leaves this place once it decides you belong to it. That's when I heard the knocking again, but from inside the wall behind me. I turned, slow, my body frozen between instinct and dread. 3 knocks, familiar, steady, followed by a voice so soft it barely existed. "It's your turn." The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel movement, cold and slow, brushing past my arm, sliding toward the door. And then, for the first time, I realized the sound wasn't leaving. It was switching sides. I don't know how long I stood there in the dark, listening. My own breathing felt foreign, not quite mine. When the lights came back, the apartment looked the same, except for one thing. The inside of the door now had 3 faint indentations, shaped like knuckles, as if someone had knocked from my side. I pressed my fingers against them. Warm, fresh. I don't remember pulling my hand away. And that's when it hit me. Maybe Daniel hadn't been trapped outside. Maybe he had been here all along, trying to warn me before the door opened. Maybe every knock wasn't a request to come in, but a warning not to. Either way, it's too late now. Because now, when the nights are quiet, I hear it again. Faint, rhythmic, patient. 3 knocks from the hallway. Only this time I'm the one on the other side. If you're still here, still breathing through the dark with me, type knock in the comments. Because somewhere right now, someone's hearing this same sound, and they don't know it yet, but their door is already listening.